I lied to my husband just to find out the truth. I told him my parents lost everything and were moving in with us. He didn't hug me, didn't support me, didn't stay. He just packed his things and left. In that moment, he didn't choose me, but he didn't know one thing. I had just inherited a house and a fortune, and it was a test. I lost my husband, but I found myself. And that's when another man walked into my life. A man who doesn't talk, he shows up. A man who stayed. A man who chose me. And a year later, I was holding our daughter. Sometimes pain isn't the end. It's the beginning of a life you never even dreamed of.
Love Stories Max. Welcome to my channel. Enjoy watching, friends.
He didn't choose me, and that saved me. I remember that morning down to the smallest detail. Even the smell of the coffee was different, more bitter, like it was warning me. My name is Vanessa. I'm 29, a pediatrician. Every day I hold tiny hands, listen to crying, calm both parents and children. And I always thought I knew what real care looked like. But at home it was different. Jason and I had been married for 2 years. 2 years I kept calling happy for a long time, until I learned to look honestly at myself in the mirror. He worked as a taxi driver, always with stories. You wouldn't believe who I drove today. I came up with a new way to make money, just a little more, and we'll live completely differently. He had endless ideas, almost no results. I often came home exhausted, my head full of children's diagnoses and mother's tears, and he would sit in the kitchen, waving his hands, building plans. And I listened, because I loved him, because I believed. But there were moments I didn't want to see. The smell of alcohol, a gaze that avoided mine, a nervous laugh when I asked simple questions. One time, I saw lipstick on his shirt collar, red, not mine. I remember standing in the bathroom, staring at that stain, small but so loud. It felt like it was screaming, "You already know everything." But when he started explaining, I believed him, because it's easier to believe than to destroy your own life. I told myself, "Vanessa, you're just tired. You're imagining things." And I kept going. We didn't have children, and that was a quiet pain between us too. I worked with kids every day, but at home there was silence. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that maybe that silence was what was pulling us apart. And then something happened that changed everything. My Aunt Maria died. She was alone, no children, but she always told me, "You're my girl, Vanessa." I didn't expect anything. I just went to say goodbye. And then I found out she left me everything. A big house, old but beautiful, with high ceilings, creaky stairs, and a garden that needed hands. And money, a lot of money. So much that I sat there staring at the bank statement and couldn't breathe. I cried, not from happiness, from fear. 'Cause suddenly I realized now I had a choice. I didn't tell Jason right away. I told Olivia. We had been best friends since school. She knew me better than I knew myself. We worked together, shared coffee, secrets, tears, everything. She listened to me in silence, then said, "Do you want the truth?" I nodded. Then test him. I felt something tighten inside me. How? She looked me straight in the eyes. "Don't tell him about the inheritance. Do the opposite. Tell him your parents' house burned down, and they're moving in with you, maybe for a long time." I immediately wanted to refuse. "That's cruel." "No," Olivia said quietly. "That's honest." I didn't sleep that night. I looked at Jason sleeping peacefully beside me and thought, what if he changes? What if I'm wrong? But somewhere deep inside, I already knew the answer. In the morning I made breakfast. The eggs were slightly burnt, my hands were shaking. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't even look up at first. My parents' house burned down." He looked at me sharply. "What?" I swallowed. "They lost everything. And they're coming to stay with us. Tomorrow. Maybe for a long time." Silence. so thick I could hear the clock ticking. His face changed. First shock, then irritation. What do you mean with us? His voice turned cold. Well, where else would they go? He stood up, started pacing the kitchen. Vanessa, are you serious? We barely have space as it is. I work, I need peace. I looked at him and felt something quietly breaking inside me. They're my parents, Jason. And I'm supposed to live like in a dorm. It wasn't a question. It was a decision. I still tried. It's temporary. He cut me off sharply. No, I can't do that. And you know what was the worst part? He didn't even ask how they were. If they were alive. If they were hurt. Only about himself. He silently went into the bedroom. I heard the closet open, clothes being thrown into a bag. Every sound felt like a blow. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the table so I wouldn't fall. He came out 15 minutes later. I'll stay at a friend's, he said dryly. Until this gets sorted out. Until this gets sorted out. Not we'll figure it out. Not I'm with you. Not we're together. He was no longer we. He took his keys and left. The door closed quietly, but inside me something collapsed so loudly I thought the neighbors would hear it. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, looking at the cup he drank from, at his jacket he forgot on the chair. And for the first time in a long time, I felt clarity. In that moment he chose, and it wasn't me. I called Olivia. So? She asked. I was silent for a long time. Then I said quietly, I got my answer. That evening I was sitting in my aunt's house, on the floor among boxes and dust. The sun was setting through the big windows, turning everything gold. It was quiet there, but not empty. I ran my hand over the old wooden table and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. No lies, no excuses, no fear. It hurt, a lot. But even stronger was the feeling that I was no longer losing myself. And you know, sometimes losing something isn't the end. It's the moment you finally stop holding on to someone who let go of you long ago. I never went back to that apartment. It wasn't home anymore. Just a place I paid for every month alone. Jason never helped. Not with money. Not with life. And suddenly I realized I didn't want to keep paying for a place where I wasn't chosen. I made the decision fast. In one day I packed everything. Few boxes, clothes, books, photos that still hurt. I didn't take anything extra, only what was truly mine. And I left. To my Aunt Maria's house. It smelled like wood dust and a new beginning. I walked barefoot through the rooms, listened to the silence. And for the first time it didn't crush me. It healed me. That evening, just after sunset, someone knocked on the door. I flinched. I wasn't expecting anyone. On the doorstep stood an elderly woman with a warm smile and a man beside her. Good evening, she said. I'm Amanda. We're your neighbors. And this is my grandson, Lucas. He smiled slightly, a little shy. We brought an apple pie just to say hello. I couldn't remember the last time someone came to me just like that. Come in, I said softly. We sat in the kitchen, still half empty, surrounded by boxes, eating warm pie, drinking tea. Amanda talked a lot, gentle, kind, like she had known me forever. And Lucas listened more. But when he spoke, I paid attention. He was 32. He lost his parents in a car accident when he was a child. His grandmother raised him. And you know, there was something familiar in his eyes. Not pain, strength after pain. After that evening, he started coming by. First, just like that. Tea, conversations. Then, let me help. He fixed the old fence that had been falling apart. Helped bring the garden back to life, something I was afraid to even touch. We raked leaves together, laughed when I accidentally sprayed him with the hose. For the first time in a long time, I laughed for real. He didn't build loud plans. He just was there. Present. Real. There were no dramatic words between us. Just looks that lasted a little longer. Just silence that wasn't empty anymore. I started to feel something new. Light, warm, careful. And one day, I ran into Jason at a supermarket. I was standing by the tea aisle when I heard a familiar voice. Vanessa? I turned around. He looked different, more tired. Hi, I said calmly. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. How are you? He asked. I'm good. And it was true. He hesitated. I thought about you. I took a deep breath. Jason, it was a test. He froze. What? The house didn't burn down. It was a test. I needed to know if you would choose me. Silence. And you didn't. His eyes darkened. You really did that? Yes, because I needed the truth. I stepped back. And I got it. He said nothing. And this time it felt right. Goodbye, Jason. Goodbye. We walked in different directions. And for the first time, it didn't hurt the same way. The next day, he texted, "Be happy." I stared at the screen for a long time and replied, "You too." And I let go. For real. That evening, Lucas came by again with tea and that quiet smile. And suddenly I realized, sometimes life takes away what kept you in the past, so it can give you someone who chooses you in the future. Half a year passed. 6 months since I closed the chapter with Jason. And you know, it wasn't emptiness. It was life. Real life. I no longer counted the days he didn't text. I no longer listened for footsteps in the hallway. I no longer lived halfway. I lived. My Aunt Maria's house found a new rhythm. Morning coffee in a sunlit kitchen. A garden Lucas and I brought back to life together. Quiet evenings where words weren't needed. Lucas, he didn't rush into my life. He entered it quietly and stayed. He didn't promise impossible things. He just showed up every day. And somehow, without even noticing, the fear inside me started to melt. I learned to trust again. I laughed without tension. I stopped waiting for pain to come back. One evening, we were sitting in the garden. Soft lights glowing, the air smelling like apples. "Vanessa," he said quietly. I turned to him. He looked nervous, and that alone made my heart tighten. He stood up and took out a small box. I stopped breathing. I don't know how to say this perfectly. He smiled, a little unsure. But I know one thing. He looked into my eyes. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. My heart was beating so loud I could barely hear anything else. I want to build a home with you. Not just a house, a home. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Marry me. I couldn't answer right away. I just nodded and whispered through tears. Yes. It wasn't loud. Not perfect. It was real. 3 months later, we had our wedding. Small. No pressure. No noise. Just the closest people. Amanda crying more than anyone. Olivia squeezing my hand, whispering, "You deserve this." I wore a simple dress. Lucas, a light shirt. We stood in the garden, the same one that used to be abandoned. And when he said, "I choose you," I felt something inside me finally fall into place. No fear, no doubt, just love. Our life after that didn't become a fairy tale. It became real. Messy mornings and laughter. Little arguments that end in hugs. Shared dinners where we talk about everything and nothing. And most importantly, I was no longer alone in this life. I was chosen. Every single day. And one morning, I stood in the bathroom holding a test. My hands were shaking. 2 lines. I couldn't believe it. I sat on the edge of the tub and just cried. But these were different tears. Warm. Alive. When I walked out to Lucas, I couldn't even speak. I just handed him the test. He looked at it and froze. "Vanessa, is this?" I nodded. And in that same second, he pulled me into the tightest hug. "Thank you," he whispered. I was surprised. "For what?" He touched my face gently. "For this life." And in that moment I realized, sometimes you have to go through pain to find a love that doesn't hurt, a love that stays. Sometimes I think about life, about how strangely it all comes together, How it first gives you pain that feels so unfair, and then leads you exactly where you're meant to be. I often think about that version of me. The one standing in the bathroom, staring at lipstick on a shirt. The one afraid to lose someone, even after she had already lost herself. I wish I could hug her and quietly say, "You have no idea what's waiting for you." Because if someone had told me back then that one day I would wake up in a bright room with a man beside me who chooses me every day, I wouldn't have believed it. If someone told me my home would be filled with laughter, real soft, fearless laughter, I wouldn't have believed it. But life knows more. The morning she was born, the world felt quiet. I remember the soft light in the hospital room, the gentle voices, the way my heart was racing. And then I heard her cry, small, alive, mine, Sophia. When they placed her on my chest, I stopped breathing for a moment. She was so tiny, and yet an entire universe. Lucas stood beside me. I saw tears in his eyes. For the first time, he gently touched her tiny hand. "She's perfect," he whispered. I looked at him, and I understood. This is what happiness is. Not loud, not perfect, but quiet, real, ours. Now our home is filled with new sounds. A baby's laughter, soft lullabies at night, tiny footsteps on the wooden floor. Sometimes I stand in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and look out the window, at the garden, at Lucas holding Sophia, at the way he laughs when she pulls his hair. And in those moments I think, I'm so glad everything once fell apart. I'm so glad I didn't stay where I wasn't chosen, 'cause otherwise, I would have never made it here. To this life, to this love, to her. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Life never takes without a reason. It makes space for what is truly yours.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss new stories. And also write in the comments how you liked this story on a scale of 1 to 5. Watch the following video and enjoy watching.